All right, looks like we are live. Hey everyone, Corey here at the Grand Rapids Symphony. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Musician Monday. Today's special guest is GRS section violin Kimia Ghaderi. Kimia, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Corey.
It's so great to finally meet you. So usually in the past, all my past interviewees have been people I've known ahead of time, but this is our first time ever hanging out together. It's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of know you already from some of the other interviews I've watched and hearing about you, but it's nice to finally meet you.
Agreed. I feel the same. Everyone's shouting your praises,
Oh,
and I love that. So, I just want to remind everyone that we are going to be taking questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll definitely get to them as we go along. So, let's kick this off with the very first question we ask everyone. And how long have you been part of the orchestra?
I joined in January of 2018, so this past year was my second full season, or it's been 2 full years now, and coming into what will be my third season.
That's amazing. So you are kind of one of the young kids on campus, the newer class.
I am one of the newer, yeah.
And what's I always find cool is we have an orchestra that has a lot of people who played with us for so many years. And this question isn't really on the interview, but I would imagine that the people who have been there for a while are pretty welcoming to you, kind of just take you under their wing and help. And I'm sure you know what to do, but they probably help you along in the process.
Yeah, actually, I would say that I've played with a lot of different orchestras, either as a substitute or as a regular member, and Grand Rapids was one of the most welcoming orchestras that I had ever played with. A lot of people introduced themselves to me the first rehearsal, showed me around, invited me to meals, and that has really continued over the past couple of years. I've gotten chances to spend some quality time with a lot of different people in the orchestra, and it's just such a warm environment. So that's one of the things I love most about Grand Rapids Symphony.
Oh, definitely, and especially because when you play music, you're playing it's a part of you. It's from an emotional place, and so to be able to develop those bonds with your colleagues, just to make the sound sweeter and to hopefully free you up at least a little bit to where you can express yourself more emotionally through your music. I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's nice to know that you always have a place to go during meal breaks and during intermission. Sometimes when you're new, you can feel like a little bit of an outsider, not sure who to talk to or how to introduce yourself. But it was so easy for me because everybody kind of did the work for me. So
That's great. That's great.
yeah.
So, violin. What made you choose the violin?
Well, it was really easy for me because when I was born, my two older brothers were already playing violin. They were doing Suzuki violin lessons and group classes, and so I was going to their lessons from the time I was a baby, just kind of sitting in the lesson. And then by the time I was 5, I got my own lesson time and kind of joined the team. So music was always a really big part of my mom's life, and she encouraged us to study music at least all the way through high school. But all of us ended up doing music to some degree also through college, and I decided early on that I wanted it to be my career. So I never really second guessed it. I always thankfully loved the instrument. And I feel like it's for me. I know Barb Corbito actually mentioned this in her interview about the viola, but also one of the things I love about violin is how much it sounds like the human voice. So for me, it feels like the most direct way that I could express myself as a musician because I'm not much of a great singer, but it sounds to me like the best way to use my musical voice.
That's a really great way of looking at it. So, your violin specifically, is there any unique thing about your violin that makes it maybe stand out? Any sort of fun facts or information about it?
It is pretty unique, actually. I haven't met anyone yet who has a violin or an instrument made by the same maker, although they did make quite a few instruments. It's just not quite as common as some others. So it's made by John and Arthur Betts, which was a company in London, and it was made in 1854. And one of my favorite things about the violin, I'll get it for you, I'd like to show you, is the violin is really beautiful. The antiquing on the wood is really,
That is really cool.
really nice. But one of my favorite things is the scroll. A luthier once told me that it looked like it was carved with love or made with love, and that's always kind of stuck with me. That it's a really beautiful scroll, and every scroll on a string instrument is totally unique because they're carved by hand. So that's probably one of my favorite things about this instrument.
That's
And
so cool. I love the finish on it. It looks so unique.
yeah, it's also special to me because it was one of my former teachers, and she passed it down to me. And actually, it's her birthday today, so happy birthday, Carol! If you happen to be watching this sometime. Um, but so you know, I know it's difficult to find an instrument that you feel you really connect with when you're just on the market looking. You know, sometimes I have friends who have to look in cities all around the country or all around the world, trying out instruments for years sometimes to find one that is the right fit for them. And I was lucky enough that not only did this one kind of just come into my path, but it also, I think, suits my playing really well. And I love its tone. It has a really warm tone. So, yeah, I've had it since 2007 now, probably, maybe even a little bit earlier.
That's wonderful. That's so great. So this is a loaded question I ask everyone. Favorite composers? I know you could probably list off more than a handful, but who are some of your favorite composers, and maybe why? Why you like them so much?
Yeah, it is a difficult question to answer, but I think the only reason why it's kind of difficult is also because it depends so much on your mood and also for me, the genre. So if I look just at orchestral music, I would say at least at this point in my life, my favorite composer for orchestral music is Mahler. Um, and then in terms of just music in general across multiple genres, I would say my favorite composer is probably Brahms. I don't think there's any piece written by Brahms that I don't absolutely love. And, you know, all of the violin sonatas, the violin concerto, the piano concertos, the symphonies, the string quartets, the piano quintets, I could just go on all day. It's, you know, in every genre, one of my favorite pieces. And then I also love playing Mozart symphonies. I love Arvo Pärt is one of my favorite composers. So that's probably a handful across a few different, you know, time periods and genres. But yeah.
So many great composers you listed off. That I love that. So not everyone has a pre-ritual performance or tradition, a pre-performance ritual or tradition. Do you have one by chance?
I would say that I do, and the degree to which I follow it to its ideal kind of situation depends on my schedule for the day. I definitely like to have a more restful day before a performance if possible. I'm somebody who really needs to eat a very big meal before a performance, and if you know, I don't like to eat too close to the performance because then if you have some nerves, sometimes you might get an upset stomach or it feels like it's weighing you down. But I definitely like to eat a really big meal, like maybe a couple hours before, because I get so hungry during intermission or like two hours in if I don't. And I also just try to really kind of stay in the moment. And I try to be present in all of the activities that I do on a day of a performance because I feel like in order to be able to successfully feel like you're present and in the moment and um, relaxed in the performance, you kind of have to make that more of a lifestyle.
Mhm.
It's really hard to turn that on like a light switch if the rest of your day was frenzied and you're running around and you're feeling nervous or you're not fully aware of what you're doing in every moment. So I definitely, as I'm getting closer to a performance, try to really just center myself and focus on the present moment and really relax into it.
That's really a really unique perspective. I like that because, and the truth is, every performance, even if you're doing multiple concerts of one program, every performance, every concert is individually unique to itself. There will never be another moment like that one again. And even if you can hear a recording of a symphony or a concerto, and you know where it's going to go, every performance is still unique.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
wonderful.
Hmm.
So you love violin. This is very apparent. But if you could choose another instrument in the orchestra that you would like to play, what do you think that would be?
So I actually do play, or I should say I did used to play because it's been quite a while since I played it now. Another instrument in the orchestra, which is the flute and piccolo.
Oh,
When I was in elementary school, my public school system didn't have orchestra, they only had band. I really wanted to be involved in music in school if I could because I loved playing violin outside of school so much and I just wanted it to be as much of a part of my day as possible. So I decided to start flute in fourth grade with band in school, and then later on, when I was in high school, I started playing piccolo. And there was a time where I was in one youth orchestra playing flute and piccolo, and another youth orchestra playing violin. So that was really fun for me, and also gave me, I think, a unique perspective into the woodwind world and that side of things, and how they use breath to make their sound, and I would love to revisit flute and piccolo at some point and, get my chops back up and be in shape enough to play for more than 5 minutes. But if I were to pick a totally new instrument that I had never played before, I'd probably like to learn cello. Just get that really deep bass voice that I will never have with the violin. And I also would love to experience playing timpani for like a Beethoven symphony or something. I
yeah.
always feel like that would be a really unique perspective, and the power lies in your hands to really dictate the pulse and the impetus. So that would be fun too, I think.
That's great. I haven't heard timpani yet, and I love that.
Yeah,
People have been saying French horn a lot lately, but
that
that
just seems
that
so
makes sense.
hard to me. Violin is pretty hard too. I feel like I might want to. I don't know. I guess every instrument is hard, but French horn to me just seems like a whole other level of I can't even comprehend.
Yeah, I think everyone's been saying that just the beautiful lines they get to perform, and but all I can think of is if you're playing Mahler or John Williams or even Wagner, you're in trouble. So.
It's so exposed, yeah. Yeah, it's really impressive to me. I mean, it's really like a being a soloist as part of the orchestra, I think, for all of the French horn players.
Definitely. So, thinking about music beyond the symphonic or chamber music, do you have any certain favorite bands or styles of music that you really flock to? Like, what would we see on your Spotify playlist?
So I do listen to a lot of classical music, but I actually haven't been listening to much orchestral music. If I'm listening to something that's more within the classical realm, I'm usually listening to either, nowadays at least, Renaissance or Baroque, or also minimalist and ambient music.
Hmm.
But if I'm going totally outside of what kind of constitutes classical or Western classical music, I've been listening to a lot of indie folk and singer songwriters recently, and singer songwriters within several different genres, I would say. So, like, I've been revisiting Imogen Heap and Lisa Hannigan. I discovered Billie Eilish because obviously she's one of the most famous, like, pop singer songwriters out there right now, but it had kind of just flown past my radar for a long time. So that's been really cool to discover her music. Also going back to like Simon and Garfunkel, Fleet Foxes, again, present day. So that's kind of been what I've been gravitating towards right now is really relaxing, chill, a lot of acoustic guitar, just kind of keeps me centered.
Okay, so we're gonna be friends now after this because all the big bands you listed off, I was like, yes,
Oh,
yes,
cool.
yes. So this is good to know. If you could choose another career outside of being a professional musician, do you think you have an idea of what that would be?
I do, and actually, recent experiences within the past couple of years have kind of given me a more clear perspective on that because I've actually also been working in development with an orchestra in Ohio, the Akron Symphony.
Hmm.
And I think that, if I couldn't be a performing musician, I think my first choice, honestly, would be to try to remain in the music world from an administrative standpoint. Maybe working in development, or maybe going towards a different field within orchestral administration. But if not music at all, I think I'd like to work for a nonprofit with a humanitarian cause that I felt strongly about, maybe something serving women or refugees. I think I'd want to do something that, especially now with everything happening in 2020 being just so presently on our minds, I would want to choose something that I felt I was making a really direct influence and difference with. So that's probably kind of based on experience that I've had, a somewhat realistic, like other career aspiration that I might have. But in terms of more of a reach career aspiration, I used to ride horses a lot when I was in middle school and high school. And I miss it very, very much. And it's always sort of been a dream of mine that it would be amazing to be a professional equestrian. So
That's
if I could somehow do that, that'd be awesome too.
that's so great. That's so unique. Excuse me. So I want to remind folks that if you have questions to ask, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll definitely get to them at the end of this little session here. But we're down to our last couple questions that I have for you. With the quarantine, with the state of the world, with things. Obviously, we're all trying to look for something to hold on to stay centered. What sorts of things are you doing to stay centered? Like, what kinds of interests do you have?
I really enjoy cooking and baking, and so with the extra time and being at home and eating every meal at home, pretty much, it's been fun to kind of get into that a little bit more, try new recipes, especially trying some new proteins that I hadn't made before, or cooking them in different ways. My boyfriend and I got a new grill, so we've been doing a lot of grilling out back, charcoal grill. And other than that, I try to kind of keep a variety so that I feel like I have a routine every day, fit in a little exercise, some practicing, mostly new repertoire. I've been pulled more towards learning new things right now. Um, some reading. I have a coloring book that's really great. That's fun to do while watching TV or taking a break while cooking or something like that. So a little bit of all of that, TV shows, movies, and a lot of cooking.
That's great. Yeah, cooking here too. I made French fries at home for the first time this weekend. So
There you go. That's definitely one of those things you're not going to try just any old day during a normal busy schedule. So it's fun.
yeah, that's awesome. That's so great. So my last question for you from me before we get to the audience questions is, do you have any favorite memories of being with the GRS that you want to talk about? It could be whether I know some people are talking about the family experience, but that can be personal, it can be professional, whatever you want to talk about.
Well, one of the musical memories that I have that has kind of reappeared throughout the last couple of weeks I've been playing is, I will say, Tchaikovsky has never really been one of my favorite composers. But my first concert with the symphony was Tchaikovsky 5, and that was one of the first times, at least in many, many years, that I could remember playing a Tchaikovsky symphony, which are all pretty well known, but it felt like a new experience again. I think a lot of that has to do with Marcello really bringing a unique perspective to Tchaikovsky and being committed to making it as expressive and as refreshing as possible. So it's been cool to revisit some of the more well-known pieces, maybe that weren't favorites before, but kind of seeing them in a new light that made them become favorites now. And another probably favorite musical memory from playing with the symphony was the Einheldenleben concert that we did. It just takes so many people to even get that on the stage. Not a lot of orchestras can program it, very frequently. So that was an awesome experience, and I really felt like everybody just brought their A game to that concert. It was great energy.
Yeah, that people, not only people in the crowd, but even the orchestra has mentioned that a few times in some of these interviews too. So that was a really great show. And Tchaikovsky, I'm guessing that was probably one of our first all Tchaikovsky concerts. Even doing
Yeah.
I think that was that with Gabrielle Montero on piano for the show.
Oh, it might have been. The only reason why I'm fuzzy is because I've played with her in a few different places, so but that very well could have been one of the concerts that we played with her. Yeah, it
Very,
was early on in the Tchaikovsky journey that we started.
yeah, I love that we're doing those. Those are such unique concerts. So it looks like we do have a few questions. I see three as of right now, and if folks, if you have any more, feel free to write them in. So the first one says, "When did you first start to think I can make music my career?"
I it's kind of funny because I have two answers to that. When I was really young, like in elementary school, maybe as young as 5 years old, I can't remember exactly when I got this book, but I had a children's book called The Symphony Gets Dressed. I wish I could remember the author right now, but I highly recommend it if you look it up for kids. It actually just goes through the pre-concert routine of an orchestra, and then I think it takes you all the way up to the moment where they go on stage to play the concert. But I just remember thinking it was so cool that this was their job. That was kind of the book that showed me that this was a career for many people and that this is how they did it and this is what their night looks like when they're going to a concert. Later on, I think it was probably even as early as middle school. I think that youth orchestra was a really big motivation for me with becoming a professional musician, especially an orchestral musician. And I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area of California, which has a large number of really fantastic youth orchestras. It's really highly saturated with great music for young students. So I played with a few different youth orchestras there, the San Francisco Symphony Youth Orchestra during my last year, and going on youth orchestra tours and seeing different parts of the world and playing some of the great repertoire, working with great conductors and soloists. That was kind of a preview into what it could be like to be a professional orchestral musician, and I just loved the collaboration and wanted to pursue it from then on.
That's so great. Next question is, what is your go-to meal before a performance?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I have a go-to meal. I would say I do really love Japanese and Korean food, and I feel like it's filling, but it's not heavy
Hmm.
in a way that kind of makes you feel ill ever. So I probably, if I could just choose anything before a concert, I would want to have like maybe some like sushi and some soup or some udon or maybe like a Korean like rice dish, something like that.
That sounds real. I'm getting hungry now. I'm thinking about it. So our last question from the audience is, do you have any advice for musicians on how to select a college to study music?
I would say to think about early on as possible, several different paths in music that you might be interested in because there are many of them, and find a program that fits into as many of those paths as possible. I think nowadays, being a professional musician, it's really not only helpful, but it's essential to be skilled in a number of different aspects, whether it be teaching chamber music, that you can present a recital and feel comfortable playing, a solo recital, that you're comfortable, doing an interview like this, that you maybe have some of an idea of how the administrative side or the fundraising side of things work, because there are a lot of projects that musicians will start as independent, projects that they need to have some of that experience for in order to make them successful and blossom. So I would say that's one thing, and also for studying an instrument, I think the teacher that you spend a lot of your one-on-one time is absolutely key. So kind of becoming familiar with that teacher's style of teaching, their philosophies, hopefully meeting them ahead of time, and seeing who's going to challenge your weaknesses the best.
That's a really, really great explanation. I think that was awesome. So it looks like we're just about finished up. Kimia, thank you so much for being here. It's so great to finally meet you and to talk to you and get to a little glimpse of who you are as a person. And I'm sure everyone else feels that same way about that.
Thanks, Corey. It was really great to meet you too. Nice to talk with you a little bit and look forward to the next time.
Yes, and folks, thank you for tuning in. We're all set here, and make sure you tune in next week for another episode. We'll see you later.